We want to hear from Peter Biar Ajak, and he has also a presentation that he'll be showing you much later. But for now, just to set the conversation going about generational exits, why do you think we need a generational exit in South Sudan, and why do you think right now is a providential time?
Well, you see, Dibal, what has been happening in South Sudan, as we all know, is not something new. Since 2005, the leaders of South Sudan that has been providing leadership in the country have been getting everything wrong. In 2005, when we signed this peace agreement with the Sudan, there was a lot of influx of money. We have oil money. We were getting about $400 million per month. This was money that was going into the coffers of the government. It was enough for us to build a new future for South Sudan. The same thing, we had the goodwill of the international community, all the donors in the world, the support from African Union, from the region, from the UN, from the US, all of this was there. And what did our leaders make out of all of these opportunities? Nothing whatsoever. Of course, we got the independence of South Sudan, but we got the independence not because the leaders shepherded the people toward independence, but people made the sacrifice. They knew that for them, what was needed was for the country to become independent. But once that dream was achieved, what did our leaders do? They plunged the country into war. With all the resources that they received, they never built a single road. The only road that is linking South Sudan to the outside world is a road that connects Juba to Uganda. And that was built by the Americans. They never built anything whatsoever. So during the war, and this is why I think at this time now, this generational exit is a real solution. During the war, we had two generations, if you will. There was what we call Jej Aswad, or Black Army, which was basically those who were over 18 years old and above, those who can actually fight and go into the war. And at the time, there was also a lot of young people that want to fight. They want to join the war, and they were younger. So the idea was you group these young people together, you have them access to education, you have some teachers to come and teach them, and the idea is you have the Black Army, if you will, the Jej Aswad, to fight for the liberation, and then this Red Army, their job was now going to rebuild the new Sudan. It was going to provide, to help our people to realize the ideals of the liberation struggle. And if you look at where we are now, we have reached at that tipping point where all the solutions that are being offered by our leaders, whether it is Salva Kiir or Riek Machar or any of these people in these generations, they are unable to lead our people toward this vision of development and nation building. Of course, we cannot take away their credit that they fought and they led the liberation struggle to bring the country to where it is. But what they are able to contribute has reached the maximum that their own ability can provide. So this is the right time now for this generation to remember, because when we were in the Red Army, when we were these children of war, it was those of Salva Kiir himself that used to come and tell us, you are the future of tomorrow. You are the seeds of South Sudan. Time will come when the movement and the country will need you. So you go to school, study, you learn your history, you develop better ideas for how this country can move forward. Well, guess what? We have done exactly that. We have studied, we have gone through the different experiences, we have exposed ourselves to the world, and we are able to provide that vision that our leaders are unable to provide.
All right. So we have, of course, your presentation ready. You can guide us through on how we want it. If you may just take up the laptop also that we may go blow by what Peter Biar Ajak wants us to see. The generational X.
Yeah, generational exit. Mm-hmm. So essentially, people have been asking about what is this generational exit, and why do we need it? But we need it because if you look at the history, as I was explaining, there used to be what we call the Black Army. Many battalions of the SPLA. These were the men of the SPLA, SPLM that fought for the liberation of South Sudan. These people, they knew at that time that they may not live to see the independence of South Sudan. And what they did, they sent out for children to be brought from all the different corners of South Sudan. The idea was to basically help to groom the next generation of people. So you have this Black Army that was fighting, and then if you have the Red Army, this is the Jesh Amr. What they did was they sent words out to all the corners of South Sudan for the children to be sent, so that these children, they are trained, they're given the ideology of the SPLM, so that if the war lasts longer, there will be better trained and better equipped soldiers that have discipline, and if the war ends, they will be able to lead our people to achieve that ideals of liberation struggle. So there was always the idea of there will be a generational exit at the time. The question was, when will that time be? And if you see in this picture, this is these Red Army children when they were exodusing from Ethiopia to back to South Sudan and South Sudan to Kenya. And the gentleman in the red hat there, that is Salva Kiir himself, that is standing there talking with the UN agencies so that these boys are sent to a place where they are safe and they can be protected in Kenya. So they were called the seeds of the nation. Everybody knew about this. Salva Kiir himself knew about it. He knew that his own ideas were not enough to bring about the development. And they used to tell themselves that our job is to destroy the old Sudan. And these boys are going to build the new Sudan. Well, guess what? Where we are now, you cannot repeat the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. Einstein said that this was insanity. 2005 to 2013, we had Salva Kiir as president, Riek Machar as deputy. It was a disaster. This was the time that they stole a lot of money. Even the president himself wrote a letter to his ministers asking them to return the money that was stolen. There was a lot of intertribal violence. They did not reconcile the people. They did not build consensus on the ideas of state. And guess what happened? 2013, there was a power struggle. It was a disaster. Again, 2016, there was a peace agreement that brought Salva Kiir, Riek Machar to the same arrangement. Guess what happened? They fought again. They plunged the country back to a civil war. So we cannot be repeating the same thing and expect South Sudan to move forward. And this is why now there is a need really for generational exit. Because if you look at the proposal they are making, this proposal is really an insult to the people of South Sudan. They want to have a president, they want to have 4 vice presidents, 45 ministers, 550 MPs, 9 deputy ministers. You're talking about 32 governors. And by the way, where will South Sudan get the money to be able to afford this large government when we have gone for a month without paying our military, without paying our civil service, without paying our diplomatic services? I was just in Europe visiting some of our finest diplomats. They're living in awful conditions because our government is unable to support them. In London, our embassy has been closed. And by the way, South Sudan has been going through economic crisis. We cannot afford this proposal. Since 2013, our GDP has shrunk by about 30%. This is 30% over the last 5 years, the contraction of our economy. The budget deficit for this year alone is about 15% of GDP. Our currency, the South Sudanese pound, has lost over 90% of its value. We had inflation that peaked at 800% due to a 4-fold growth in money creation. They were basically just printing money after money to sustain the government. And now they're proposing to have this crazy government. So, of course, what is needed is this generational exit. What are we talking about? We are now talking to these children of war. By the way, there were over 100,000 of them. And they are now spread all over the world. They're in Canada, they're in Australia, they're in the US, in UK, in South Sudan, across different institutions. They're in the army, they're in the intelligence services. They are there. So what is needed now is for this group to realize that the mission that their leader, John Garang de Mabur, was preparing them is now here. And what is required as part of this negotiation going on, honestly, is to answer the question that Salva Kiir asked. Salva Kiir asked 2 months ago when he was addressing people in Juba. He said, if you want me to exit, to have a peace agreement in which I will not be there as president, what is my incentive? That is precisely the question that should be addressed. Instead of bribing all these warlords that are creating war and using it as a way to advance themselves, why don't we actually have a deal with Salva Kiir and talk with them so that we offer him a package so that he can exit and so that South Sudan can build an economy for the future? Because if you look at the future, this is basically what is going on with climate change. And South Sudan is a country that is poor. And countries that are poor and that are exposed are going to be seriously affected. If you look at the whole continent of Africa and where South Sudan is, we are going to be affected. And the only resource we are producing now, oil, we are not investing it. The money is being stolen and is being wasted in this war that is going on. We are being left exposed, and the future generation of South Sudanese that are going to come are also being exposed to this climate change. So it's something that we need to keep in mind. We have no time to lose whatsoever. Second is the issue of population growth. If you see in our part of the world, if you can go back a bit, Debal, to the previous slide. Yes, this is the population growth. If you look at the population of Africa and Europe, and if you see what just started happening around the year 2000 there is the explosion of population in Africa. we are going to be about 40% of humankind by the year 2100. And our region, where we are, is going to be having a lot of people. So we cannot afford to have regimes that cannot govern, and we cannot afford to not invest in the livelihoods of people, because you're going to be dealing with the combined effects of climate change and high population growth, and then add in terrorism and issues of crimes. These are all the different terrorist and illicit trade networks across Africa. This is a perfect recipe for a region that will continue to be behind in every measure of sustainable development, because we are going to be left in conflict. And with conflict, there's no way we can have sustainable development. So what is needed really is for our leaders now to realize that that time when we used to talk, that the Red Army and the new generation will have to come at some point and provide vision for the country. This is what we need to do. We need to look at how do we transform the network and incentive of violence, and how do we build a viable economy. What we need is a complete change of leadership, a transitional leadership that allow our people to focus on a 3-point agenda of building a road networks, building a massive housing network. And what we will do with that housing is to retire these generals. Instead of them going to office every day looking for work because they need salaries, we build for them houses. Let's have 50,000 housing units everywhere in the country. We can pay for this by basically putting some tax on the oil produced in the country. We produce about 160,000 barrels of a day. If you look in the period of a year, it's about 6 million barrels of oil. If you tax that, it can provide you about $350 million a year that you can use to finance housing development. And the justification is oil is polluting our environment, and it's an asset that we are depleting, and we are not building up another asset. So overall, we are going to be left poor. So this can allow us to raise this capital so that we are able to invest in our people, reimagine a different kind of state, and build a future that will work for us and our children. I think this is the reason why generation of South Sudanese fought. They fought a civil war that cost 2 million lives. They endured a lot of pain, and the idea was to bring about this country called South Sudan so that our people can move forward. Let me stop there, Dubal. Let me get a bit into the next steps, what our people need to do. We need immediately to establish points of contacts in Nairobi, Kampala, Addis Ababa, US, Canada, Australia, Europe, reaching out to Lost Boy and the diaspora, intensifying our lobby efforts in these countries to basically pass a simple message. Our leaders are asking for incentives. Let's offer them. If we need to give them money to exit, let them have the money. If it is that they don't want accountability so that they can exit, that is enough accountability. What we will not accept is for them to continue to be there and they are not exiting and there's no accountability for them. That is what we will not accept. We need also to build consensus among the members of the Red Army, among the members of the party. It's not everybody in the party that is corrupt. This SPLM has some of the nationalistic, patriotic people that the world has ever seen. We need to reach out to them, talk to them. Our commanders, the commanders of the Red Army, talk to them. Time has come for South Sudan to have a generational transition. We need also to tell the international community they are misusing their power. It's not about putting pressure on Salva Kiir and Riek Machar to work together. The idea is putting pressure on them so that they can exit together and see what sort of incentive is needed, what sort of deal can be made to them so that they leave. We need the region and the international community to understand that this 3-year transition of forcing Salva Kiir and Riek Machar to work together will never work. What would help the people of South Sudan is for these men to exit. It was known that they will have to exit, that the time for them to exit was coming, and guess what? That time is here. It's time for the seeds of the nation to flourish and come to the rescue of the country. It's something that we cannot escape. All the members of the Red Army, wherever they are in the world, you cannot escape. This was a historic mission that was given to us. That time will come when we will need to step up and lead this country and this movement to another level, and that time has come now. We cannot continue to say that we are young. Most of us are reaching 50 years, 45. When will we serve the people of South Sudan? I believe now is the time. Salva Kiir wants incentives. I'm sure Riek Machar wants incentives. Let's give them the right incentives.
Right. Thank you, Peter Biar Ajak. And of course, when we talk about 45 and 50, that's pretty young in Africa, right?